All right, everybody, welcome back. We're going to spend about 20 minutes doing a report out from the small groups, and Lisa Gaines, who is the director of the Institute for Natural Resources, is facilitating it for us. And before I turn it over to Lisa, I would ask all the other facilitators from the breakouts to go ahead and turn your cameras on. Thanks, Alicia. Take it away, Lisa.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, everybody. We're still glad that you're so with us on this wonderful sunny afternoon. And with daylight savings happening, we can continue to work till 5 or 6 p.m. and still go outside and enjoy the sun. So thanks for being here. I just want to call out our facilitators. We have Lauren, Lucy, Jen, Amanda, Inka, Jacob, Alicia, Aaron, Julie, and Nori. Thanks for not only facilitating the breakout sessions, but for being able to go through how we're going to do a report out in our condensed time. We wanted to make sure there was enough time for questions at our previous session and that there'll be enough time for our next session. So what I'm going to ask you all to do is to think about new concepts. You spoke about a number of things with the group that you had. I'm going to ask you to we're going to go on a round robin, and you're going to introduce one concept that was spoken about in very short form. If a concept you are interested in talking about is already said, say a different one. And if you don't have a different one, just say pass. We're going to run through that maybe once or twice, and then we'll be able to make clarifications and or comments to some of the discussions that were made in our breakout session. So for everybody else who's online who is also muted, we're going to offer you the opportunity through the chat to write in some of your clarifications or comments about what was discussed in your breakout session. What this is going to allow us to do is to be able to also hear your voice through your fingers, but also we know that the chat text is recorded. So we have a number of ways of capturing some of your ideas. The session was not about answering every single question. It was about getting a chance to have people share what was on their minds and to find out what was brought up. What were some of the things about consensus or disagreement or just some new insights? So I'm going to start off by calling each facilitator one by one as briefly as possible, introduce one new concept, and we'll start with Lauren.
Okay, I'd say that one of the consistent concepts that was commented was that people really appreciated learning about who owns forests. It's not clearly, not everybody knows that, and what percentage of those forests affect the drinking water, and what percentage of that is private land. So.
Great, thank you. Lucy.
Okay, collaborative governance.
Excellent. Jen.
The transitory nature of the herbicides that get put into the water and the lack of monitoring that we do as a Oregon government in testing for those herbicides and when they're tested, because there's so many different variables on site and also within the chemicals.
Thank you, Jen. Amanda.
We had a lot of insight. The biggest part of our conversation is that it is important to come together and begin the conversation, that larger conversation. All the groups have different values and different standards and regulations they need to meet. We all care about our communities and water resources, and having these conversations allows us to start out on the same page and have common ground.
Thank you. Inka.
One of the things that was brought up was that, if you're a water manager, that you actually kind of wear a lot of hats. And so you are relying on experts in other fields to, learn the best way to get high quality water. And so you need the foresters and the other natural resources experts in the room too.
Great, thank you. Jacob.
Kind of consistent with Amanda brought up was that managers are usually agreeable to conversation and need to know the concerns in order to adjust practices.
Great, thank you. Alicia.
Very consistent with what others have said, but the amount of collaboration and partnerships that are necessary in order to do any of this work is quite impactful, and people can understand that, you all have very similar objectives in mind. It can help make the process go a lot easier and smoother.
Thank you. Aaron?
Thank you. We had a really productive session. I would say that one of the key takeaways among the many topics we discussed was that you have to have communication to avert misunderstanding, and you also need to assure there is no disinformation or misinformation through education. And also that communication can go a long way to reducing any sort of adversarial relationships or conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
Thanks. In tune with many of the others said, I think one that came up I haven't heard is the looking at risk reduction in advance and managing for that risk, again, through communication and looking at those factors in the watersheds.
Thank you. And Nori?
We talked a lot about the different perspectives that were being offered on the different issues that came up today.
Fantastic. So I got a couple of things. I'm just going to sort of just quickly highlight what was said to make sure we got it all down. One, we talked about who owns the forest and what percentage of that land is in drinking water and what percentage is in private lands. There were conversations about collaborative governance, the idea about the transportation of herbicides and what there may be the lack of monitoring and testing that might be happening at the state level. The idea that it's really important to bring everybody together because everybody comes in with different perspectives, and the fact that our water managers wear many different hats, and they need to know some of the opinions and the thoughts of others who are in the room, and perhaps some of the others who have not actually been able to come into the room because of the conversation and where they might be located on the landscape. Definitely emphasizing that collaboration and partnerships are important, particularly to avert misunderstandings or or disinformation, and to really think about risk reduction in advance. And all of it basically coming down to is that if we can get together to speak, we might be able to help resolve some of these issues because we often have similar objectives, but are approaching it from different roads. I hope I recapped that well enough. What I'm going to open it up, the chat, to the individuals, everybody else in the room. If you have any clarifications or comments, feel free to start writing in that section. We're going to start going around Robin again, and we're going to ask Lauren, do you have a new concept, or is there anything you would like to qualify with what you said or that list that was read?
Yeah, I'll add a new concept. I thought something that came up in our group was that water quality managers are interested in foresters knowing that some of the things that are working are things like the generating culverts and looking at roads and erosion and what's going into streams. But with that, it was also mentioned that in small communities, doing things like doing those repairs and setting aside land for buffers can bear a cost, especially for small communities. And it would be interesting to bring together some information about how that cost share can happen and incentives for those small communities to bear that cost of doing those extra things.
Thanks. Lucy?
Yeah, just that landowners and industry can both agree that extra protective measures are necessary beyond the Forest Protection Act regulations.
Thank you. Jen?
We also talked about the buffer requirements around streams that contain drinking water in them. And there were some comments where it seems like some of the buffer requirements are lax in Oregon compared to other states. And we wondered, are they large enough? And the need maybe to do further work on determining that for domestic water supply.
Thank you. Amanda?
Yeah, we had a similar conversation about buffers, mainly in the industry, just having faith that land managers are doing what's required, but also some pessimism and wondering how we can further come together and have this dialogue and conversation to make sure that those things are being done.
Thank you. Inka?
Yeah, we also had, like, so some of the other breakout groups talked about testing, the water supply and the source water, and that's kind of like, it's you know, more or less like incumbent on the water districts to do that. And, you know, that can be a barrier for smaller ones. And so, yeah.
Jacob?
Yeah, we kind of talked about the adequacy of the Oregon Forest Practices Act as well, and what managers in some cases do to go above and beyond what is the baseline requirement in the OFPA.
Thank you. Alicia?
One of the other things we brought up, the group brought up, was how it could be beneficial in some situations to do watershed tours with all of the interested parties. It's an opportunity for people to get together, get on the same page, and be looking at the situation from the same context, kind of being in the room together, but out in the field.
Great. And Aaron?
Yeah, one of the major things that came up in terms of the conversation was the cost to those small communities in terms of, you know, if they have to create a new water intake system. There can often be communities with very small populations, and you know, spending $1 million for a new water intake system can be quite costly.
Okay. Julie?
So going off of what Erin said, you know, some of the discussion was about if there could be maybe incentives from things like the governor's office or other, both financial on places that are being collaborative. So if you have those collaborations set up, could there be incentives, you know, along with the regulations already talked about?
Excellent. Nori?
One aspect that came up was a water treatment manager talked about how he would like to have forest managers visit his operation to see physically all the different aspects of it, so that they could literally see, kind of walk in his shoes, kind of to see the on the ground aspects of it, to understand it.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm going to have 3 people unmic for a moment, and that's going to be Lauren, Lucy, and Jen. And my question to you, is there any insights from your groups that you would like to make sure that we have said for this recording that came up that haven't been talked with yet, or any clarifications in any order? Go ahead.
Something that I could say, we had the benefit of having Paul Newman in our group, which was really great. And so we also talked about rainfall events and how, when, you know, it's not just when the chemicals are sprayed or when the chemicals are applied on the land, but also it's important to test after rainfall events. And so rainfall might happen 2 or 3 weeks after the chemicals were applied, but you really need to be thinking not only of the application time and like he talked about during the presentation of testing once every 2 hours, but take a look at other weather events that occur, and just be thinking in a broad way.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
I'll add that multiple people commented on how impressed and surprised they were about the Stimson voluntarily doing all the monitoring that they did, and that they wanted people to know that private landowners and managers really care about the land and the quality of the water, and they're really interested in sharing science with water quality experts, and so that each other can learn about what they do and make sure that we get it right.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and then we just briefly talked about compensating landowners if you go above for extra protection, and also that sediment can come from management activities, but can also be associated with natural system processes.
Super, thank you. Then for Amanda, Inka, Jacob, and Alicia, if you will unmic, the same question to you. Is there anything else that you would like us to know from your group in let's give you guys about 2 minutes or so, 2 or 3 minutes. And if you don't have anything else to share, that's quite all right.
Go. We had a couple of things. Some folks were surprised that of the amount of testing that's not going on with smaller groups of communities using a water source for drinking. There was some concern for that. And also a comment that there are incentive programs like EQIP through soil and land water conservations that are available for people to do work on. And to sort of echo Lauren as well, we all care about these water systems and these sources. We all want to do what's best.
Thanks.
One thing that was mentioned in our group was that folks were really impressed with the extent of the collaboration in Oceanside in that model. And they were really interested in learning more about the results from that monitoring. They were happy to see that people were talking, trying to find solutions to community problems. And maybe that model can be explored more to see how it can be applied to other, both smaller local coastal watersheds and also to commercial timber companies.
Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing that we talked about is kind of how the timber companies can, do some, positive outreach to their communities and, really kind of counteract some of the concern that people have and the negative reactions that they might be having. And so we talked about kind of having these, making sure you're having these kind of person-to-person connections with neighbors, with community members about the work that you're doing. And that you're proud of what you do and you care about the environment as well.
Jacob, have you got anything to add to that?
Just one thing, I think we just kind of discussed that, in the end, we want the same thing. And for the most part, timber companies and managers are, they're cooperative and they want to work with people in order to accomplish some of these goals.
Thank you so much. And then for the last three, Erin, Nori, and Julie, if you'll unmic, and the same question to you, anything else you discussed that you'd like the whole group to know about? We have about 3 minutes total.
I'll just jump in really quick. I thought it was interesting, a forest manager saying that they wanted water folks to know that they can control some things, but they can't control the public or wildlife.
Excellent.
Julie, did you have anything?
Yeah, so we had two things. The first one was interesting, was for something that they'd like forest managers to know is also if land becomes available for sale, that's especially in the watershed or near the intake, that kind of having that first rights, if maybe the community or the someone in the watershed that's involved with the water district might be able to purchase land. And then we didn't have time to finish our conversation, but knowing that we have a multitude of research like paired watershed studies, Ripstream, this trees to tap, how do we take all of this research and help look at forest management practices? So we have a variety of research in the state, and how do we bring that all together to maybe influence practices?
Awesome.
The only thing I would have to add is from the forester perspective, in terms of what they would like the public and water managers to know, are the amount of investments and then also the risks that are involved in terms of long-term, how long is it going to take to get timber, to the point that it's harvestable, the risks of wildfire or windstorms or other damage to that product. And so there can be, millions in profits, but there can also be millions in losses. So something to keep from a perspective from the industry as well.
Well, thank you all so much for reporting out what your groups had to offer. We understand that you couldn't report everything back. So we would like everybody, if you can, to take the time to go into the chat and make some clarifications if you wish to, hopefully within 2 minutes, as maybe Michael's setting up for the next group, but maybe not during the next panel. So thank you so much for your time and everything that you are contributing to us understanding about forest management and community drinking water. Mike, back to you.
Wow, you're incredible, Lisa. You're all incredible facilitators. Shannon and John and I didn't know if this breakout thing was going to work, but I think it did. If this discussions in the groups were as great as the discussion that the report out just shared, they were very good. So get ready. We'll do more tomorrow on a different subject.